Hey everybody, Nick Espinoza, your chief security fanatic here, and today we are talking about government surveillance because we are living in the golden age of government surveillance, especially here in the United States. Now, this is coming from the Associated Press, and this was absolutely fascinating. As ordinary people have become increasingly dependent on big tech services to help manage their lives, American law enforcement officials have grown more savvy about technology than they were 5-6 years ago. Now, that's according to Cindy Cohen, the executive director of the Electronic Frontier Foundation, which is a digital rights group. She's also the one that coined the golden age of surveillance here, and quite frankly, I think she's right. And I like the EFF. I think they're doing the cyber lords work. Now, when law enforcement officials need to cast a wide net for information, they're increasingly turning to the vast digital troves of personal information created by big tech companies via the devices and online services that essentially have addicted billions of people around the world to using them. Now, data compiled by 4 of the biggest tech companies shows that law enforcement requests for user information, such as phone calls, emails, texts, photos, shopping histories, driving routes, etc., have more than tripled in the United States since 2015. People are also increasingly savvy about covering their tracks so as not to alert suspects, of their interest, meaning the police are covering their tracks, not people, excuse me. Now, in the first half of 2020 alone, the most recent data available at the time of publication, Apple, Google, Facebook, and Microsoft together fielded more than 112,000 data requests from local, state, and federal law enforcement officials. The companies agreed to hand over some data in 85% of those cases. Facebook, including its Instagram service, accounted for the largest number of disclosures. Now, most crimes, from larceny to financial scams to even a recent fatal house party stabbing at a vacation rental booked online, can be partly traced back to the internet. And so tech providers, especially social media platforms, offer a treasure trove of information that can help solve these crimes. Not only has this become far easier for police to trace the online trails left by suspects, they can also frequently hide their requests by obtaining gag orders from judges and magistrates. Those orders block big tech companies from notifying the target of a subpoena or warrant of law enforcement's interest in their information, contrary to the company's stated policies of disclosing these kinds of things to their users. Of course, there's often a reason for such secrecy. According to a former federal prosecutor, Andrew Pack, it helps prevent investigations from getting sidetracked because somebody learns about it. And he said, and I quote, "the target perhaps or someone close to it," meaning if I'm under investigation and I get wind that my data is being subpoenaed, I might change up the game, start deleting things, shredding things, whatever that is. And I think that's what they're talking about here. Now, longstanding opposition to such gag orders, though, has recently resurfaced in the wake of some revelations of President Trump orders under his Justice Department. Apple in 2018 shared phone and account data generated by 2 Democratic members of the House Intelligence Committee, but those politicians didn't find out until May of this year, once those gag orders expired. And I'm not getting political here, but that has obviously been making news lately, that basically the Trump-era Justice Department was going after apparently what could be considered competitors, of the president, being a Republican, they being Democrat, and so we'll see how that shakes out. Now, many tech companies are quick to point out that the majority of the information they are forced to share is considered non-content data, but that can include useful details for the police, such as basic personal details that you supply when you register for an account, or the metadata that shows when you called or messaged someone, though not necessarily what you said, because metadata is just the tagging, not the actual voice transcription or message that you're sending. Now, law enforcement can also ask tech companies to preserve data, basically any data that's been generated by a particular user, which prevents the target from deleting it. Doing so doesn't require a search warrant or any judicial oversight, according to Armin Tayadon, a cybersecurity associate, speaking to the Associated Press. Now, if police later find reasonable grounds for conducting a search, they can return with a warrant and seize the preserved data. If not, the provider deletes the copies and, quote, "the user likely never finds out." Now, nearly all big tech companies, from Amazon to rental sites like Airbnb, ride-hailing services like Uber and Lyft, and service providers like Verizon, now actually have teams to respond to such requests and regularly publish reports about how much they have disclosed. disclosed. Many say they work to narrow the overly broad requests and reject those that aren't legally valid. But as I mentioned before, the statistics show that 85% of these are always honored and not fought. Now, some of the most dramatic increases in requests to tech companies have been essentially to cater to young people, meaning those platforms that cater to young people are now starting to see a rise in the amount of subpoenas. As the messaging app, for example, Snapchat, has grown in popularity, so have the government requests for its data. Snap, the company behind Snapchat, fielded nearly 17,000 data requests in the first 6 months of 2020, compared to only 762 in the same time period in 2015. And obviously, Snapchat has grown in popularity, as other social media platforms have as well. And I think this is actually a very serious issue that we have here. And I don't necessarily think it's a law enforcement one, in the sense that the law enforcement's job is to look for crimes, is to get a court-ordered subpoena to look for information, whether they're going to your house with a warrant, and searching under your couch or your bed or whatever that is, to looking at what you are doing in your life, providing they have probable cause, reasonable cause, whatever that is, to get that warrant, and a judge agrees that, yeah, this person is potentially guilty of a crime, so they need to be investigated. But I think it really underscores a couple of different things. One, we don't really have privacy on these big tech platforms. I've talked about this over and over and over with especially Facebook and Google. Being able to data mine you for their own marketing and advertising purposes, as a revenue generator. So why not hand that over to the police, when the police come knocking 85% of the time. But other companies that consistently advertise or market privacy, like Apple, for example, saying, oh, well, what goes on your iPhone stays on your iPhone. It's bunk. It's not true. Outside of the law enforcement thing, they've been consistently caught, in various ways, getting your information in some way, shape, or form without your consent. And as much as Apple has made strides, with their cybersecurity grading and their App Store and all of that, these are the kinds of things that we have to talk about. But we also have to understand that while we're using Facebook and Google and everything else, and this actually includes the wireless at your local coffee shop, your local Starbucks, or whatever it is, we have this expectation as a society that technology is simply there for us to use, that it's private, it's safe, it's secure, it's fast, and it's always on. Look at the younger generation, let's say of 20-year-olds and younger, that essentially were born with mobile devices, in their hands. They're ensconced in technology, and they don't necessarily think about the ramifications of that. So of course they're going to be comfortable speaking freely, about a potential crime if they're criminals on social media. Not to mention other things like health information. We have protected health information here in the United States that is governed under HIPAA, so it's private. And then people put out just their most intimate details of their health situation on Facebook. Like, oh, please pray for me. I'm going in for cancer and everything, because they want that group, hug, if you will, the support from their social media. But at the same token, Facebook is saying, oh, well, that person has cancer. Let's go tell the insurance company. Maybe that is going to cause you problems down the line, because we have seen, as in New York State, for example, where they will data mine you for that kind of thing. So this is a huge problem. I think it's society-wide. I'm not pointing the finger at law enforcement here. I am pointing the finger at everybody. We need to understand that our data is not private when we're using these platforms. We also need to understand that law enforcement is going to do what law enforcement does. We also have to understand that law enforcement can and will overreach at times. And we also have to understand that these platforms are more than willing, at least 85% of the time, 8.5 times out of 10, they are going to give your data over to law enforcement, and 10 times out of 10, they're going to give your data to the advertiser. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP, and please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well. And as always, stay safe and stay online, and please stay private. Thanks, everyone.